years to produce. He improvises quite easily on the piano. He has a lovely tenor singing voice. He's never used an ATM machine in his whole life. And he drinks more and better coffee than God. Cy is a native of Brooklyn who attended Queens College, went on to get a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University, then worked as a reporter at the Long Island Press. For 3 years, Cy was a real journalist, but something was missing. So he quit the newspaper, and he and his wife spent 2 years in Europe before moving to Chapel Hill to join an intentional community. The community flopped. Cy did odd jobs, and then in 1964, he started the Sun with 50... Jesus Christ. In 1974, which I should know, he started the Sun with $50 borrowed dollars. In the years that followed, Cy dug dishes, shoveled shit, placated creditors, basically schlepped like mad to keep the Sun alive, all the while holding fast to his vision. The result is a magazine with more than 70,000 subscribers who come together each month to explore the joys, sorrows, and simple dignity of being human. Working with him serves as a reminder to slow down, to pay attention to quality and kindness, and in the words of Emily Dickinson, to dwell in possibility. I want to close with something that Sparrow said recently when he introduced Cy at the Sun's 40th anniversary celebration. What's amazing about Cy is not that he dreamed up a brilliant idea, but that he labored at it for decades. When the prospects for the Sun were dim, when the whole enterprise clearly was leading nowhere, through near exhaustion and near bankruptcy, Cy never missed a deadline. He pursued his work the way a madman pursues his conspiracy theories, the way a scientist studies her amoebas, the way a monk who has begun to doubt the existence of God nevertheless gets on his knees and says his prayers. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Cy Safransky.
I've already grown attached to my little rubber duck, so... Where's Chris? So what is the duck supposed to remind us of? Play, okay. It's a hard concept for me. The book, the new book, it's not so new anymore, is arranged in chronological order, beginning in the year 2000 and coming up to the present. So if I read anything that's, how do they say, time sensitive, you have to put it in context. So if I refer to myself as middle-aged, you know that was written a long time ago. If I refer to our president as George W. Bush, you'll wince and remember it's no longer true. Maybe you won't wince. Sorry. So I have a Republican friend now. Who objects to the left-wing cant in the Sun, and I have to agree with him to some extent. We overdo it sometimes. Okay. I worship alone in the early morning. My coffee as black as the sky outside. There's no rabbi here, no priest. No one is feeding me chicken soup for my soul. Here in the darkness, I won't be confused with a busy editor whose calls have screamed, who gives generously to all the right causes, who every month assembles the wisdom of the ages on the last page of his magazine. Here, I remember that so many fools like me have come and gone. We eased out of bed before our lives were up, sat on the floor, talked to God. How skillfully we bargained. How beautiful are words. Let the minutes show that I'm here, that I braved an none too happy childhood. Legal drugs, illegal drugs, organized religion, disorganized religion, toothaches, stomach aches, the occasional headache, plenty of heartache, the death of my father, the death of my mother, the death of my infant son, 3 marriages, 2 divorces, and a long and utterly impractical love affair with myself. My first cup of coffee must be strong because I want to be strong. This may be demanding too much of coffee. I think I'm going to emphasize my notebook entries about writing, given the nature of why we're here. In college, I was a political science major who never took a creative writing class. I went to graduate school to study journalism. Not because I went to graduate school to study journalism. I miss my cats. It's a substitute. I went to graduate school to study journalism, not because I wanted to be a writer, but because I wanted to change the world. I didn't even start to write poetry or keep a journal until I was in my mid-20s. That's when, on a beach in Spain, I took LSD. Everybody knows what that means? I don't even know, but it's... I sort of think... You forget certain things. I took LSD for the first time, and saw the earth breathe, and discovered that everything was alive, and realized that if I wanted to report the biggest story of all, to describe not just the facts, but the truth, I'd need to learn how to use a living, breathing language. Even after all these years, though, I'm hardly confident of my craft. Each time I start a new essay, I have to remind myself, I don't write an essay by writing an essay. I write by putting down sentence after sentence, good sentences and bad sentences, handsome sentences and homely sentences. If the words are alive, my paragraphs don't need to show up wearing expensive suits and ties of Italian silk. Sometimes it helps to remember the poet William Stafford's advice. If you don't like what you're writing, lower your standards. I wanted to be eloquent, but language was in one of her goddamn moods again. Silent, brooding. I tried to touch her. She slapped my hand. Note to self. When the writing isn't going well, don't blame it on global warming, or anti-Americanism, or anti-Semitism. Don't complain that with more people writing today, there must be fewer words to go around. Don't sign a petition that says the muse is dead, or spread rumors about her temper tantrums, or try to cause a rift between her and the other goddesses. And when she finally staggers in, her hair unbrushed and her lipstick smeared, don't ask if she's been making out with younger, more handsome writers who know just what to whisper and exactly how to kiss her, and who have made larger donations to her nonprofit foundation and under the table to her political action committee. Don't ask if size counts. I received a warm reception at my reading yesterday. It's gratifying to know my writing is appreciated. Everyone loves the sound of applause. Today, however, I'm reminded of the Zen koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? When I'm writing in my notebook early in the morning, whose applause do I want to hear? If the words come from my heart, stripped of artifice and the need to impress, it doesn't matter. But when I try to make these sentences better looking, everything's lost. I didn't get up before dawn to watch a middle-aged man admire himself in the mirror. Is that a new shirt he's wearing? I'm not impressed. Naked, I tell him. Naked is all I care about. And I don't mean naked except for your underwear. And I don't mean naked except for your charming smile. Well, since there was so much talk about meditation this morning, after talking with my friend Tom about his newfound commitment to Buddhism, I was ashamed that I couldn't remember the last time I had meditated. How spiritually inadequate I felt, like a boy who wasn't doing his homework. Every single day, the Buddha said, we should remember we're not here forever. Each moment is precious. So what am I waiting for? For tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, in this disappearing act called a life? I put down the book I'm reading, a book about mindfulness, and pour myself a cup of coffee. When I pick up the book again, I accidentally knock the cup to the floor. I realize, of course, what an opportunity this is for self-mockery. But would I jump in right now with a sarcastic comment if this had just happened to a friend? Can I simply be aware of what occurred without passing judgment? Living more mindfully means living more mindfully. It doesn't mean judging myself for not being more mindful. Someone sent me a bumper sticker that reads, "Non-Judgment Day is near." It can't come soon enough. Today, before doing any of my practices or not doing them or agonizing over whether I should or shouldn't do them, can I just pause for a moment? Can I remember that I don't have to be perfect to experience a moment of perfect love? God doesn't need me to sing God's praises. God already knows all the tricks a man can perform with a 26-letter alphabet. Deepening my awareness is a challenge. It isn't a challenge because my parents didn't love me enough. It's a challenge because it's a challenge. I don't need to take it personally. I've spent years excavating my past, sorting and cataloging the wreckage. But who I really am, the essential truth of my being, can't be grasped by the mind, no matter how acute my insights. I've confused introspection with awareness, but they're not the same. Becoming the world's leading expert on myself has nothing to do with being fully present. I'll start with gratitude. You can never go wrong with thank you. Since I woke up with a headache, I can be thankful I have a head. I can be thankful my head is where it belongs, that I'm a man with a head on his shoulders and not up in the clouds. Does my head hurt because I stayed up late last night drinking wine and smoking marijuana with an old friend? Thank you for the vineyards. Thank you for the seedlings, and thank you for the buds. When I got home, Norma was sleeping. Thank you for the moonlight on her long dark hair. I think I'll leave George W. Bush alone today. I didn't want to get out of bed this morning. I didn't want to get dressed, stick my head out the window, and wave to my readers. The sky was dark, of course. It always is when my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Rumors that the sun would soon rise swept through the crowd, but I knew this was wishful thinking. They wanted the night to be over, but I reminded them that, as usual, the darkness had other plans. They wanted me to say something upbeat and reassuring, but I reminded them I wasn't that kind of man. Loneliness lives at the edge of town. I visit her now and then. Sometimes I bring a poem of her, though she doesn't read much poetry. It makes her too sad, she says. My poetry, especially. Okay, loneliness, you win. 3 wives, not good enough. 2 adoring daughters, you didn't blink. lovers, friends, 2 gray cats who sit on my chest and purr. You were napping, you said. You don't remember. The spiritual teacher Stephen Schwartz encouraged me not to try to explain loneliness and not to condemn it, but to see it as a kind of prayer, a deep longing to feel God's presence. I woke up in a body, breathing. I'm drinking black coffee now. I'm still breathing. The dark morning stretches like a cat. The billions of people who are asleep are breathing, and the billions of people who are awake are breathing. How is it possible for me to feel alone? I dreamt that my dead mother told me she and I were still married, but haven't had sex in many years. Is there any hope for me, Dr. Freud? Being married to a psychiatrist hasn't seemed to help, nor have hundreds of hours of psychotherapy. This morning when I sat down to write, my dead father pulled up a chair beside me. He wanted to remind me I might not have what it takes to be a real writer. And I wonder which of my dead ancestors I'll be channeling at the staff meeting today, and why I worry that some staff members only pretend to like me. Tell me, little grasshopper, what is the sound of losing what you never had? And isn't it futile, little grasshopper, to imagine that an office full of happy, loving colleagues will ever make the house you grew up in into a happy, loving home? Last weekend, I heard poet and men's movement leader Robert Bly tell of trying to get back home when his father lay dying. In Seattle, he missed a connecting flight. Now, Bly said, his voice tremulous, every time I'm in that airport. He started to cry, unable to finish the sentence. Later, I told him how moved I was to see him weep in front of more than 100 men. He said it was easier now that he was older. Years ago, he couldn't cry even when he was alone. But he went into therapy at the age of 60 with a man who had a very expressive face. I'd tell him something about my childhood, Bly said, and his face would turn sad. And I'd say, why are you looking so sad? And he'd say, what you're telling me is sad. My lament is the same lament. My wife is sympathetic, but she's heard it all before. Even the beautiful English language shakes her head when she sees me coming. Him again, she thinks, with his 50 synonyms for sadness. What if psychiatrists came up with different language to describe the suffering of people who troop into their consulting rooms every day? Instead of diagnosing a young woman with borderline personality disorder, God, I hate that phrase, borderline personality disorder, probably because I have such tendencies myself. How about lost in the realm of the fluttering leaves? Instead of depression, how about buried by avalanche, still breathing? And just as the Inuit have different words for snow on the ground and snow in the air and snow that drifts, maybe we could have different words for tears. Tears we'll forget by tomorrow. Tears we never cried but should have. Tears that fall from our children's eyes. Tears that fall too quickly to wipe away. So reading for 11 questions, and right, is that the deal? When did I start reading? 10:30? Yeah, okay. I can't go over, but there's hell to pay. Readers, huh? Yeah? Right? Okay. Readers sometimes ask how much I edit my own writing. I edit until each paragraph has lost the 10 pounds it gained over the winter. I edit until each sentence can survive 3 days in the wilderness on its own. My father taught me to look at a sentence, and if it didn't deserve to live, shoot it between the eyes. Ignore the pleas of the women and children. Take no prisoners, he said. Why do I idealize the Zen master who sneaks up behind a drowsy student and whacks him with his bamboo staff, yet fail to praise my father, who wielded his editing pencil and left some bruises too? That's metaphoric. He didn't hit me with the pencil. He also taught me to sit up straight. What better reason to bow to him? The muse whispers, don't write like someone who fears death, but puts a brave face on it, or tells a self-deprecating joke about it. The world doesn't need another Borscht Belt comedian. Don't write like a man who worries that his writing isn't good enough. Is it good enough to tell your neighbor there's smoke pouring out of her upstairs window? Don't sit there coughing as her house burns to the ground because you can't think of a synonym for fire. And one of my favorite quotes from Annie Dillard, write as if you were dying. At the same time, assume you write for an audience consisting solely of terminal patients. That is, after all, the case. What would you begin writing if you knew you would die soon? What could you say to a dying person that would not enrage by its triviality?
Oh.
That doesn't mean you can't have fun when you're writing. I wasn't going to read much about God today, but after spending some time with one of our monks here, I want to do that. How many times have I prayed to see God? How many times have my prayers been answered? Still, I'm unconvinced. When the bush burst into flames, didn't I turn on the radio to see if it made the news? Didn't I check the mirror to see if my beard was singed? I sit beside a lamp, not doubting the light it shines on this page. I don't say I believe in the lamp. I don't argue with myself about what I mean by the word lamp. What would it mean to see God everywhere, even here in my kitchen in North Carolina? If I could see God here, I wouldn't need to keep looking for God in the eyes of gurus and between the covers of books. After dinner, I'd do the dishes, then step out on the porch and look at the stars. I wouldn't strain to see God in the distance. I dreamt that instead of worshiping one God, I was free to worship as many gods as I wanted. But I wasn't satisfied with the new gods I chose. I missed my old God, his self-assurance and occasional flashes of temper. My new gods seemed so eager to please. They spoke too slowly, too loudly, as if I were a foreigner asking for directions. Not like my old God who'd say, read the fucking map. I'm going to stop and answer some questions to the best of my ability, and I'll read a few more entries. And, yeah. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
When you first started doing your personal writing, did you find such a pull towards your relationship with God, or is that something that evolved with your writing?
Well, I started believing in God, or what I imagined God to be, the day I took LSD. It was a life-changing experience for me, and I was in my early 20s. And since then, I've reflected a great deal on what that word means and what it means to me. That is also around the time I started, this was before I started The Sun, but it was when I started writing more personally. Up until then, I wrote news stories about what other people do, Yeah.
You mentioned that you rise at 5.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm wondering.
You have to throw that book out. It's not true anymore. I used to get up at 4. For years I got up at 4. And then I got older, and it was getting harder to do that since I wasn't going to bed at an early enough time. So I made a deal with myself, which I've not kept, which was that for the rest of my 40s, I'd keep getting up at 4. In my 50s, I'd sleep until 5. In my 60s, I'd sleep until 6, which in my 60s just seemed like heresy. And when I got to my 70s, I would sleep until 7, which seems ridiculous to me. So I'm 70 now, and I still get up at 5, so I'm a very slow learner. But those early morning hours, if you're able to, some people I think are just constitutionally, it just doesn't work. It would be nuts to try. You know, you get what you need late at night, or just, you know, being like both George W. Bush, if I can invoke him in a kind way, and my wife Norma, who have this in common, that they each, apparently, he did this when he was president, go to bed at 10. It doesn't matter what's happening. The lights are off by 10. And get up at 6. And get their 8 hours. And Norma, at least, performs great that way. I don't know about but there's a quality to being awake then. For one thing, well, with the internet you could always be distracted. I started doing this before the days of the internet, but nobody's going to call you at 4 in the morning unless it's some emergency that you want to know about. And the other people around you are mostly asleep. I mean, nobody else wants to get up that early. So you really get to experience a profound silence outside of you, which can be helpful. I still find. A question from that woman in the back with her arm up. Hello, Caroline.
You said something recently in the office that I found extremely helpful, and I was wondering if you could tell us why.
Did I answer the question?
Why
You were saying, I was asking about writing. You said something.
I never remember what I said. Why don't you say what I said?
Well, you were saying write to help others.
Well, that's an abridgment, maybe. But okay, okay, good. No, thanks. That helps. Let me try to say it now. I write about myself a lot, right? It can seem extremely self-absorbed, self-indulgent, and you can add a few more things. But when I'm doing it in the morning in my notebook, I'm sometimes doing it just to clarify what I'm thinking about something, so it's useful therapeutically, and I wouldn't necessarily print that. There's only so much I'm going to subject my readers to. I try to make a distinction, I think I refer to it, between being self-revealing and self-indulgent. But part of why when I'm editing that sort of writing, I'm editing it with an eye toward what might be helpful to a reader. I think it's generally helpful when a writer is as honest as possible, although just piling up one honest thing on another doesn't necessarily get the writer anywhere or the reader. So I guess I'm offering up my own lived experience and my own doubts for a reader in the hope that something will resonate, knowing that I run the risk of seeming like a major league narcissist. But I'm willing to run the risk. I'm not doing it because I feel like, oh, I'm so important, everybody needs to know everything I'm thinking and feeling. That's ridiculous. If I think it might be helpful. So I guess if you go right to the end, yeah, I'm trying to. That's why I do the sun. I want the sun to be of benefit to all beings.
So that's
right.
it.
Another question? Yeah.
I just wondered, looking back over your accomplishments and the obstacles and the successes and the failures and all the things that you have done that have been helpful to so many people and that the magazine itself has done to be helpful to so many people. You don't seem like the kind of guy that would pat yourself on the back, but if you did pat yourself on the back for one thing, like your shining light, what would that one thing be?
Certainly the magazine more than my writing. Because the magazine is not, it's a collective endeavor. So I have the great privilege of, I guess I'm at the heart of it in a way, but you know, if there wasn't everything happening around it, there'd be no magazine. You know, the magazine is made up of writers such as those folks who are here today whose work you're reading in the magazine. I didn't write that. I've edited it, sometimes, perhaps, not so elegantly, but I hope so. But, you know, and the readers also sustain the magazine. There wouldn't be a magazine without them. In any event, I think the magazine, if I were inclined to do that very dangerous move, you can hurt yourself, stopping yourself from it. So I avoid it. And in a less jokey way, it's part of my... This insect is trying to tell me something. I'm not listening. It's going to whisper the truth in my ear, and I do tend to focus on what I haven't accomplished at the end of each day, rather than on the fact that, oh yeah, I personally and we collectively actually did some good today. I'm still working on that. Yeah, with a helpful therapist. Yeah, I hope. All right, maybe just one or two more questions, and I'll read one or two more chapters. Yes.
So I just want to say thank you. I've wanted to be in this place for as long as it's been here, because I'm that old, and I remember when I heard of it when I was like 70. And also as someone who has a 40-year-old institution, I appreciate what you've done, and I appreciate your staff for helping keep it open, because I know that that's part of it. So good work surrounding yourself with good people, and you've helped many of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? I was going to ask me what's going to happen when I die. Good, good.
One more.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, I preface this by saying that the last major earthquake in California happened just about this time. And
What do you mean this time? This date?
October.
Oh, wow.
Yesterday.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And that there's a distinct possibility we might hear some rumbling, and this entire tent might fall into the ocean, as I see out there.
Mm-hmm. Great lesson in impermanence, yes.
With that in mind, what is the last thing you would tell us?
What a wise guy. The last thing you probably hear from me is, help!
I'll be the first to go.
Alright, back to the subject at hand. Remind yourself, I think I saw another one that way. You don't need to sound smart, Mr. Smarty Pants. You don't need to have an MFA or a PhD. You don't need to know the answers to the 10 most difficult questions. That was one of them. You don't need to know what those questions are. You don't need to make sure that everything you write is all muscle, not an ounce of fat. You don't need to send only your best and brightest sentences into battle. If you do send them, you don't need to pretend they'll win. Why do I imagine that my sentences need to be better dressed than I am? If I'm not the kind of writer I'd like to be, let me start with that. Let me start with my rumpled clothes, with the overcast sky, with how inadequate I feel to the task at hand. But please, no more self-improvement schemes. The man I am is the man I am. As Paul Simon sings, when they say that you're not good enough, well, the answer is you're not. Man, I know I'm aggravating some of the people here who believe so much in positivity. I have a sort of reaction to it when I'm at Esalen. I mean, deep down, I agree with them, but it's too deep. In the cartoon, the psychiatrist tells his patient, "You have an inferiority complex." The patient asks, "What causes that?" The psychiatrist replies, "Inferiority." The inner poet clears his throat. The inner poet insists that he can't begin working until the trash is emptied and the house is tidy and the planets are aligned. But there's no right time to start writing again. I can't wait until I'm enlightened. I can't wait until, sorry, I didn't know it was in there, until George W. Bush and Saddam Hussein sit down and work the damn thing out. As Gail Scher says in her book, okay, it's Gailsher, so I'm anticipating the question. In her book, One Continuous Mistake, 4 Noble Truths for Writers. And what she says is, if writing is your practice, the only way to fail is not to write.
Huh.
When Pablo Casals, the world's foremost cello virtuoso, was in his 90s, he was asked why he still practiced 3 hours a day. He replied, "Because I think I'm improving." How can I make sure I get up early every day to write? This is a question I ask myself every day, and the answer is always the same. It's a simple answer, but I don't want a simple answer. I want the answer to be long and nuanced, to take into account how little sleep I got last night, and how cold and dark it is this morning, and how my mother didn't love me the way I wanted to be loved. The answer isn't interested in all that. He's already up. He's dressed and waiting. Thank you.